Welcome back to the second part of this tunnel book project, and I wanted to show you how simple bookbinding can really set off your beautiful scene in a rather lovely way. I'm using proper bookbinding card and I've cut it out to 24 centimetres by 19, and I've got two pieces of that size, and then I've got to make a spine which is also 24 centimetres high and 5 centimetres wide. And then I'm going to be using proper bookbinding fabric, which is basically paper backed fabric in this lovely silver grey colour, and I've cut it out 3 centimetres wider than the book is going to be, so that I've got plenty of fold. And then I'm turning it over and I'm marking that 3 centimetres quite accurately so that I got lines to position my cards against. And what I'm going to be doing is taking the first piece of the cover card, I put PVA glue all over it and then carefully position it on the paper. Once it has dried a little bit, I check the other side and burnish it, usually with a tea towel, make sure it's nice and smooth, and then stack some books on top of it and leave it to dry for an hour. Once I'm happy that it's dry, then I will do the next bit, which is the spine, and you've got to make sure you leave a gap for the fold, and the best way of getting the right size fold is to use the edge piece of your spine and mark it with a pencil. Then cover the spine with PVA glue, position it carefully up to the lines that you've just marked, leaving that perfect gap, and then I'm just going to cover it with a bit of plastic and put a book or two on top of it for a couple of minutes. Then it's stuck enough for me to be able to turn over and get my tea towel and just do a bit of burnishing to make sure there are no bubbles and that it's stuck very evenly. Once I'm happy that that's done, I will turn it back over, cover it with plastic again and a bigger stack of books, and leave it for an hour or so to dry. Once I've done that, then I can do the other cover, doing exactly the same technique to make the fold, and then the PVA glue and sticking it in place and repeating the same as I've done before. So you've got a very nice cover for your book. Everything is stuck, and then I need to do the sides, so I've just trimmed the corners, leaving a small gap, 1/2 centimetre in each corner, and I'm going to be sticking this with PVA glue, and because it's stiff it's quite good to get an edge by just tipping the whole thing up like that and folding it over, just to create that line at the bottom before you actually stick it in place. And again, I'm going to be using PVA glue. Having done the long sides, I've folded over a short side, and I'll show you this last one that I'm going to do. You've got this little extra bit in the corners, which just take your nail and push it in so that when you fold it, it neatens it up. And do exactly the same at the top. I've marked a rough line where this is going to be, and I'm going to put my PVA glue along here. So having put my PVA glue on, I'm just spreading it about with the brush and making sure you get some down the sides as well, because you want that to be stuck firmly, and being reasonably generous with it. And I've marked the line, so I've got 3 centimetres of glue. And then once I've done all that and I'm happy with the spread, then I am going to tip it up on its edge as I did before, make sure that adheres at the bottom, and then putting a bit of spare paper underneath so that in case any glue comes out, firmly pressing it down. Just going to put some plastic on the top and weight it down with my trusty cookbooks once again, and leave it to dry for an hour. And now what I've done is I've cut out a piece of the bookbinding fabric paper, 1 centimetre all the way round less than my book cover, and I'm just, as you can see, splodged PVA glue on it, which I'm going to spread around to cover it all with my brush, and then I'm going to position it carefully on the inside of the book. It's not the easiest thing to do, but getting it straight and taking your time is quite important at this stage, and also using your trusty tea towel to give it a really good burnish before you do exactly the same as you've done before, and weight it down under plastic with your books on the top. I used a large plastic bag and some large cookbooks, and once again left it for a good hour. Having stuck your front piece on, this is what it'll look like when it's dry and after it's been weighted down. I weighted it for about 24 hours just to make sure there's no buckling of the card. And as you can see, it folds very nicely and you can decorate it how you like. Now, the next step is to do the inside bit, and I'm going to have the poem on the left-hand side, and I will have the tunnel book on what will be the right-hand side. And I've got my little LED box, which I'm going to position like that. Then I will have the scene on top. But of course, I do want an LED in here. And this is what I've got, which is a little battery-driven 20 LEDs on wire. And I will be putting this in at the bottom, and I'll be running the cable through to the battery, which will sit there. So obviously when it's done, it will look something like this and light up the scene rather beautifully. So my little battery is just 2 centimeters across, and it is 5 centimeters high. So what I've done is I decided I wanted to use the same bookbinding material that I'd covered the cover with. So I cut out a piece that is 3 centimeters wide, an extra 0.5 centimeter on the bottom, actually it's nearly 1 centimeter, about 0.7, for the gusset, and then again another 4.5 centimeters on that side. And because the bookbinding fabric, it is paper lined, but it's not very thick. I normally use card, so I've just reinforced the tops with card just to keep it straight, and then I've scored it and folded it, and that is going to make the slot for the battery to sit in. Now obviously that by itself isn't going to be sufficient, so I've got another piece which of the bookbinding fabric, again with a gusset either side. I've made the centre 3 centimeters long and the gusset just under 1 centimeter, probably about 0.7, and scored it. And I ran it through an embossing folder just to get that nice embossing finish. And what I'm going to be doing is I will position that round as a cuff, like that, sticking it at the back, and that'll hold everything nicely and give plenty of room for the battery to go in and out. So having made a little hole in the side of my LED box, I've stuck it in place just 1 centimeter up from the bottom, nice and straight in the middle, and I left it to dry for a few hours. I've also made my little carrier for the battery, and that I'm going to be sticking at the same level. But before I do stick that, I'm going to feed my LED lights through the hole that I've made, and I want them to be uplighting, so I'm going to keep them in this bottom section. So I've got 20 LEDs here on a wire, and I need to feed them all inside. Once I've got them to the junction, then I am going to just leave this wire at the side here. I shall bend it up, and you need to leave a little bit of laxity for when you want to change the battery, and so I will put that in its carrier when I've done the wires inside. I had printed off my poem on A5 card and just cut it out to the same size as the tunnel book, and I have done negative cutouts of holly for decoration because I thought the silver would look nice coming through, and I've stuck the poem in place. The next thing I'm going to have to do is make sure those LED lights are secure, and I've put them into a bow right the way across the bottom, and I don't want them more than 5 centimeters high because I don't want the LED lights to be individually seen behind the nativity. and that works quite well. I've stuck them in place with some sellotape. Now with that wire floating around, I decided I'd make a carrier, and so I've taken another bit of the bookbinding fabric, embossed it. I'm going to be sticking it to the back cover and then onto the actual little box, so that it'll just hold that wire loosely in place and it'll just keep it contained and look neat. I also stuck the battery carrier in place, and I used the battery as a means to press so that it could really stick on the back cover, and a paperweight on top, and left that for an hour or so to dry. Finally, I need to position the tunnel book scene itself, and with that I'm going to be using all-purpose glue, because I think that works best with paper to paper. And I'm just going to be putting some all-purpose glue around the edge of that little light box and sticking it in place, and then I'm just about done. The last thing I did was decorate the cover, and I put a title on it, and I did some negative die cutting to get that lovely silver effect through once more. You can decorate it how you like, and this is what it looks like when it's stood up on a table or a shelf. So a rather special poem you can take down and read, and a decoration that you can enjoy on those dark nights leading up to Christmas, and something that can be reused each year and kept safely tucked away inside its book the rest of the time. It looks just as pretty in the daytime, and I hope you will think that it is something that might inspire you to try something similar yourselves. I hope you've enjoyed watching, and I look forward to welcoming you back to another project.